Tweet this.
What is going on, RotoGrinders? Dean here. That's Dean 7904 in the DFS circles. We're live on a Wednesday night NFL Pick 6 show. Of course, it's kind of a funky week. We're going to be talking some Thanksgiving games, the two games that have survived. We'll talk about that briefly. And then, of course, we'll get to the main slate in a second momentarily. If you guys are watching this on a Friday, just trust all the picks for Thursday were perfect. And you guys missed out. And then you can just sort of fast forward. You see the graphic when it sort of jumps to the other games. We're not talking about the Thursday games. That said, bring in the usual suspects. Batting first, leading off. Hey, John Daigle, you're no longer with Evan Silva. We missed out. You're on the road. You moved on. How are things? Are you going to be okay? Have you written? Have you emailed? Have you texted? You and Silva doing well?
I think I'm going to be okay. It's clearly a gloomy day. And also, I've heard that my internet may be laggy, so we're going to fight through that tonight as well. Either way, we're doing better. I will admit that I watched Peter Overzet's stream, the Swolecast stream, I should say, earlier today, and I got very jealous that my friends in life were already drinking at 2 p.m. So I have a bottle of champagne ready to go, and we are coming in hot to the Pick 6 show, which is superior to the Swolecast, by the way.
Why is it ready to go? You can drink during there's no I didn't sign anything. I hope you didn't sign anything as far as we can. If you're thirsty, feel free to kick back on Grandpa's cough medicine. I
do. When I tip back my coffee cup on this show weekly, I shouldn't admit this secret, but it usually does have alcohol in it. Having said that, it's now okay because it's the holiday week. I can actually say that now, so it's fine.
You're spiking the eggnog. Hey, can you give us a fun fact? What did we learn about Silva? Give us something that kind of surprised you. Can you tell the people? Take us behind the curtain for a second. Any fun fact that you learned? About Evan Silva and your day-to-day.
Still many, but one of the ones he would probably not get mad at me for admitting is that rather than cleaning dishes, he throws them away. I had to correct him on that.
Has he heard of paper plates? Is that not an option?
We started instilling that option later in life. Don't worry.
I just know a couple of years ago I saw him at an RG party, and he took foosball very, very seriously. I'm not sure if you ever played.
Still does.
Okay.
Still does.
What's going on, Rich Hribar? You know him, of course, from Sharp Football Analysis. Rich, if you happen to have a Silva anecdote as well, feel free to share one. Well, you guys used to do this show together a couple of years ago, so you know each other well. Have you ever roomed with Silva, or I'm assuming not? Probably not.
Yeah, man, multiple times. All the stories about Evan, though, I can't share any of the stories. None are appropriate.
Do you have any on Twitter? Well, if we hear notifications in the background, that's because of Juju Smith. He retweeted you today, and your phone's dinging all night long for sure.
What a disaster.
If it's not Juju Smith talking about the game being canceled, it's people giving their Thanksgiving food takes. Do you have is there a take you want to give the people, Rich, or just pretty standard?
Pretty standard for me. I mean, obviously we're not going anywhere this year, so nothing extravagant. There's no reason to go whole bird or nothing like that. I'm not against or really, super pro, Thanksgiving food either. I mean, obviously I feel like a lot of people that don't like turkey have never had a real good turkey, but I understand that it's bad. It's easy to mess up turkey, and overcook it. But I'm not real big on like food holiday traditions. I like it to be random. I like, maybe I want to have a taco Thanksgiving or, lasagna Thanksgiving or, do something different. And I have an aunt that does that. So we've mixed it up a few times. I like those a lot more because when you have multiple families and you got to travel and go place to place, like you want to just eat the same meal at every spot. So I like to mix it up. I like all different things.
We're going to be talking the Thanksgiving 2-game slate. Of course, if you guys are not aware, the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game is now moved till Sunday. It is currently on the main slate for DK. I don't know if it's going to be on FanDuel's main slate or not. No idea what's going to happen there, if they're going to move it or just kind of like give it like a showdown spot. Who knows? We'll see. Stay tuned on that.
Everyone that wants to play Marquise Brown a favor. They're just going to save him.
Yeah, it's a Thanksgiving miracle. I was going to play some Marquise Brown. And I
got so upset that people weren't going to play Marquise Brown. Like I thought that was the edge and not playing him on the 3-game slate. But apparently we're not going to get that anymore.
Oh, man. Yeah, he played 23% of the snaps last week. I saw him drop a pass, too. Of course, he had the goose egg as well. And, man, I'm not here to name names, But if I'm going to say there's one person that's costing the most money this year, it's probably our Hollywood or maybe Duke Johnson. That's a good segue, I suppose, to the Thursday night slate. Two-gamer going down Thursday night. It's going to be Houston versus, I should say, was it Thursday afternoon, 12:30 on the East Coast. Houston, Detroit, Washington, Dallas. Open it up for us, Daigle, because, again, we're not paying for Dalvin Cook. There's not a lot of studs necessarily on the slate. It's kind of, sort of, somewhat a pick-em. Cash games sort of build themselves, obviously, in tournaments. Ideally, you want to find a way to be different. I guess we could start at the quarterback position. And, well, I mean, how do you get away from the obvious chalk here as far as quarterback? We're talking about Watson is projected for at least 5 more points than anybody else. That's your cash game quarterback, of course. But in tournaments, give me a path. Paint me a story that says that Watson's not necessarily the guy in tournaments.
The only path I have, because it's the same one I've been trying to paint for myself all week long, is that maybe the Lions' offense isn't bad without Kenny Golladay. Maybe. Like 5 full games now without Golladay. Stafford's averaged 6.8 yards per attempt. He's been under 6 yards per attempt in 2 of his past 3 games without Golladay. But to this point, he's played the 4th toughest schedule in the league. So maybe against the Texans, who we know can't cover the Lions, it's better. Having said that, if you're trying to sell yourself on Marvin Hall, like as a deep play, as I've heard some shows say earlier today, the fact is, like, Marvin Hall's usage was there, but Marvin Hall is not a 8-9 target guy. Like, Marvin Hall's still Marvin Hall. And the fact is, without Kenny Golladay and especially DeAndre Swift, this offense is simply cratered. So you could possibly sell yourself on Stafford. I'm trying to talk myself to it even right now at literally a quarter, if not lower, of the ownership behind Watson, who we know is going to come in 65, 70+% owned in this 4-game slate. But that's really the only narrative contrarian I have for this game.
Yeah, Hribar, that's probably the correct number, give or take. If it's 60% or 55 or 65%, obviously Watson's just going to covet so much ownership. And he's the only quarterback amongst the 4 that has legs. Stafford was referenced. And, both these games, not terribly, jumping off the page as far as totals. What is a 50.5 as far as Houston, Detroit, which is nice. 46 as far as Washington, Dallas, not as appealing. Andy Dalton on the back, he's in the back 9 for sure. Alex Smith might be on hole number 18. It's Watson's world, but anything can happen in a 1-game sample size. So if you're going to, start with a quarterback and start with a stack as far as tournaments, if you're going to get away from Watson, or just say, hey, let's just click the lock button and go well over the field as much as we can.
You could do that. I think if you want to play Watson in tournaments, that the play would just to be co-contrarian with your stacks. Don't be the team that stacks him with Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller.
People are doing
that's
that?
The way. What's that?
Are people doing that? Is that a strategy that will be implemented?
Well, I mean, look at last week. He got there. He had 30 points. Neither one of those guys scored. So, I mean, you hope he runs it in. I think that's the only way. If you're going to play Watson in tournaments, I think you got to get creative with the build, because I think, you're just going to see a lot of those 2 guys paired with him for obvious reasons. Obviously, Will Fuller's got 6 touchdowns. Cooks has 3. But you can get there maybe with people trying to play Kiki QT. Maybe the pivot is they play 2. Maybe they play more 2 tight end sets. Maybe they play more 2 tight ends. Maybe he throws a touchdown to Duke Johnson. I think that's the only way. That's the way you get, if you're going to play him in tournaments and match the field, I think you need to get creative with the way you stack him. In general, with this slate, I think you need to be not scared to leave a lot of money on the table. Definitely on the slate, because there's going to be so much overlap with just the 2 games now and removing a lot of big ticket items. You just don't need a lot. It's not like we're just trying to wedge guys in. We don't have that problem. You can play whoever you want, basically. So don't be scared to, when you're making lineups and trying to have some uniqueness to your lineups, don't be scared to leave a lot of salary on the table on the slate. Just I would imagine that probably the winner will have a lot of salary left on the table, that if there is one winner that's unique. But I do think in Watson's case, you if you're going to go with him, you try to find unique ways to stack him or not stack him, at all. Because I said, you look at last week's game, he got there without either one of those guys doing anything. It's probably not a normality, but it's possible. I think on the other side, I'm a little interested in Stafford. I see his projected ownership's a little higher than what I thought it was going to be, but still, in a paddle place. I mean, Houston just doesn't rush the quarterback at all, man. Like, they don't get any pressure. They allow a ton of passing points per game. They're 28th in the league. And you've seen Stafford, like, his bulk stats are real bad with Galladay. If this was like a main slate, I would never try to sell you on this. But the fact that it is, 4 quarterbacks, and we've got one that's basically going to have 2/3 of the ownership. You look at Stafford, this game's it's not the highest total of the 2 games. If it can get there, Houston's defense is bad. And he's thrown 3 touchdown passes against the Washington football team and the Indianapolis Colts, basically with Kenny Galladay out both games. So there is still a ceiling with Galladay out of the lineup too. It's possible. It's in his range of outcomes. He's shown it against better defenses than this. So sure. I mean, we can get there. We can get there with it. Because if this game pops in totality, someone's got to along for the ride on the Detroit side. And I mean, it's got to be Stafford, right? Like, if they're going to match, like, I mean, it's like if Watson goes off to the point that we think, it's not going to be just DeAndre Swift like running it back if he plays. They're going to have some passing volume.
Jump in here, Daigle. Go for it.
Oh, I know I'm taking Silva's place on the show now by citing Dr. Chow, but Dr. Chow doesn't think Swift will play. So we'll go with that. Also, we know that Stafford, if he's successful, it will likely go to Marvin Jones. And Marvin Jones, by the way, who had a touchdown. I know the Lions offense cheated. They were in a legal formation, but he had the touchdown negated. So that would be the player that's likely going to come in probably like 20% under owned compared to Fuller and Cooks, who everyone else is going to play. So it's a pretty simple solution to stack Stafford if you think it's going to get there. If it were a normal slate, like Reeves said, I would never play Stafford in a million years with Galladay out. But a 2-game slate with only 4 teams where the other quarterbacks we have questions about as well, like, sure, why the hell not?
The most owned tight end's going to be on there for the Lions, Hawkinson, for what it's worth. And yeah, it's funny. I thought Swift was going to play. In my head, he's going to play. And I was reading, and I'm not too savvy with the levels of the protocol as far as concussions, but somebody was saying he's in level 4 and he's got to clear one more level, and we shall see. And I assume if he is cleared, like, it wouldn't be an issue as far as durability. It's just a concussion, right? Which is serious, but it's not like an actual like injury where he's going to nurse an arm or nurse a leg or something like that. So I assume he gets his normal workload. And if he's out, I guess you got to look, you hold your nose and at least take a peek at Adrian Peterson if they're ahead, if you think they're going to be ahead, or maybe carry on in some catch-up mode. But I think the running backs are pretty appealing as far as the Washington-Dallas side. We didn't talk about Duke Johnson as kind of a passing, but, in theory, he's on the field a lot. But, like, I guess not all snaps are created equal because, like, he doesn't get the ball thrown to him, and he runs it. He runs it for like 3 yards. But the matchup, of course, is pretty good here for the running back position.
Well, that's the thing is that both of these teams are their weaknesses. The Detroit's, they're both pretty bad at defense in totality, but they're both so bad against stopping the run. But neither of these teams run the ball well, especially without DeAndre Swift. That is like the biggest problem. You always, because you want to look at that, you want to say, all right, we're going to get the elevation here, right? But you can't do that with these Texans. With like David Johnson wasn't that guy before. We could never really elevate him just solely on matchup. They're not catching passes. I mean, and honestly, like this, Duke is fine. I think he's even like a fine whatever floor RB2 in season long leagues because that's where we are. But I mean, we've got 2 teams that they throw the ball better than they run it, basically. So I mean, and 2 teams that are really bad against stopping the run. Houston is the worst team against stopping the run. By a long shot, especially giving up chunk plays. But if it's Adrian Peterson, we don't want any part of that, really, even though he'll probably end up scoring twice. He'll have 45 yards and score 2 touchdowns. That's what'll happen. That's the problem, though. And I mean, I think that you like I said, I think the Houston tight ends are interesting. Like I said, that maybe they play more 2 tight end sets. Jordan Akins, had 5 for 83 last week. See if he gets involved a little bit more. We know Darren Fells, especially on a short slate, like he always could score a touchdown or 2. They use him near the goal line. I don't think it's just a one-off where QT just becomes Randall Cobb by any means.
Yeah, I mean, people may lead on him as a cheapie, 3.4K on DK. Daigle, what are your thoughts? Clean up this game so we can move on and talk about Washington, Dallas.
Yeah, well, I think you let ownership dictate, go to RotoGrinders, subscribe, get the ownership numbers, and let that dictate how you stack Watson, because if QT comes in under owned, I'm very interested. But if Akins is looking like the better play, I think he's a great option. It's a thin tight end slate. Every week is a thin tight end slate, let's be honest, except if Kelsey's on the main slate. But Akins was used differently last week in that he was involved in competitive game script, whereas prior to injury, he was only involved in negative game scripts, and otherwise it was Darren Fells. So at least we have that going for us. So I'm actually more interested in Akins in this game than I am QT for sure. I think Akins is honestly the best tight end play, even over Hawkinson in a vacuum on this entire slate.
I doubt QT will be chalky. Like I said, with that game, that late game being removed, that there's just it's not hard to get to the plays you want to. It's not like you're just picking QT out based on salary now. You're going to be playing him either for uniqueness or to just get it for something different. You can play anyone you want to play. You
don't need the salary saver essentially, and then again, to speak to that. And you mentioned the RG, the projections, the tools, things of that sort. You can get $5 off your first month. Devin, go ahead and drop that link in chat. What's up, YouTube? We haven't said hello the entire time. YouTube, like, subscribe. We do appreciate that. It does help grow the channel. Gets these free shows out to the people. Get yourself $5 off the Core 4. It's football, baseball, basketball, and golf. Basketball right around the corner. So I did 300 simulations, 300 quote-unquote optimal with some tinkering. And QT landed in 9%, and our projected ownership right now is 5%. And this stuff is all fluid. The closer and closer you get to lock, the more precise that number gets. And there's still some incomplete information out there as far as Swift. We don't know who he's going to play, and there'll be a domino effect, obviously. McLaurin, I assume McLaurin's going to play, but we shall see. Stay tuned. He's questionable as well. Speaking of McLaurin, he's in that game against Dallas in a dome, both these games in a dome. McLaurin against that Dallas defense really popping for me. I know it's Alex Smith back there chucking, but he's been perfectly fine, and plenty of usage too. A pretty concise offense as far as McLaurin. Just as long as McKissick is not stealing all those catches, I want it to be a Gibson week. Let's talk about the running back spurs here, Daigle. As far as Gibson, as far as Elliott, if you want to stretch out and talk about McKissick getting those 2-yard catches, your thoughts?
What narrative are you telling yourself? You have to do storytelling in Showtime slates and 2-game slates. So it just depends on the game script you think dictates for these running backs. Having said that, the past 2 games, they have played more snaps on the field together because they've lacked the receivers. I was actually excited about playing Cam Sims. I've never said that in my life before, but here we are on the Thanksgiving slate because he ran 27 routes on Smith's 28 dropbacks the past week. But with Dontrell Inman back this game, we know Cam Sims is pretty much out of the rotation. Instead, it's Steven Sims locked into the slot role inside of McLaurin and Dontrell Inman. So I think McKissick, honestly, has the second highest floor among all the running backs on this slate, assuming Swift is out. And that's why I'm leaning to him as one of my favorite plays, because 9 points, in my opinion, it doesn't matter in normal slate, but in 2-game slates, that's probably what's going to carry you across the goal line here. So if Washington falls back behind the Cowboys, which I also don't expect to happen, then it'd be McKissick clearly because of negative game scripts. That's the guy. But even if they're ahead, the fact that he's now being used on the field at the same time as Gibson, I think his pass catching floor is far too high to just remove him from the field altogether. He's one of the players I'm actually locking in no matter what.
Wow, it's funny. I want to make Gibson happen more than McKissick, and I believe Gibson just kind of eked him out as far as snaps last week, and I think that's partially to the fact that they were ahead. If they're behind, they're more likely to be chasing. Well, they will be chasing. Of course, that's how it's going to go. And McKissick is more the receiving back. And I'm going to assume that Zeke, you have at number 1, right? Elliott's going to be your top running back.
I want to ask both of you because I don't know. Zeke in 4 games prior, basically went busto, and then he comes back after the bye. I always had this little offensive line shift, right? Zach Martin, all-pro right guard to right tackle, Joe Looney in for Tyler Biadasz at the rookie center. He went on IR, and Andy Dalton was pressured on only 4 of 34 dropbacks. But again, that was Minnesota, who's not rushing the passer anyhow, and has a terrible secondary unless they're playing Nick Foles. Everyone who has a tremendous secondary when they're playing Nick Foles. Now it's Washington, who is basically living off of their front 7, a nightmarish one. And so I kind of think the Cowboys offense and the Cowboys offensive line are faux. And I want to bet against that in this game. I could be wrong, though. So I want to get y'all's opinion on basically fitting Zeke.
Yeah, Rich, you jump in here. My thought is, I don't love Elliott. If he was in the main slate, I wouldn't be playing him. But I have the money, and it's about raw points, I guess I will. Dalton is there, and it's not DiNucci, and Dalton's not spectacular, but I think he actually gives you a little bit of stability. The veteran savvy. DiNucci was a disaster, and then Dallas was a disaster for 3 straight games or something like that. 4, maybe 4. I don't know. I might be rounding down and selling him short. But Dalton's not spectacular, but I think he stabilized that offense to some degree. And Elliott, dollar for dollar, is not great, but I have the money, so I might as well. What's your thoughts, Rich?
I mean, you're just talking about from just a touch projection. I mean, there's really no one that can compare to him at the position on a slate, even bad or worse. He could be terrible and get 19 touches, and he could be great and get 19 plus touches. I mean, we know what we're getting here. Whereas, Gibson, assuming Swift is out, Gibson is like the next best back we would turn to. But they have to have positive game script for him to kind of hit his ceiling. And so we've seen like both of those 2 running backs at Washington backfield is so split on how the game script goes. I mean, in the 2 wins that the football team has since week 1, when McKissick started playing, he has 3 catches and 2 catches, 4 targets and 2 targets. They just don't need him when they don't like. You feel he's locked into that role. Maybe the play is if you want to get unique with the stat, you play both, and you can cover your game script like a couple weeks ago when they played the Lions. Because if they do get inside the 5, it's been Gibson on every carry but 1. Over the past several weeks. So I mean, you can cover your bases that route, but McKissick just hasn't been involved when they don't need to play catch up. They are road dogs though, so the signal would be that they will. I think that Washington's a live dog. I just don't think Dallas is capable of like pulling out and boat racing anybody. Well, not a defense that's as good as the football team is up front. I do agree with Daigle. I think that a little bit of the pressure stats that were just a little bit coerced by the Vikings in totality. They don't have Danielle Hunter. They trade Yannick Ngakoue too. So, I mean, their pressure rate stats on the season, which aren't good to begin with, are even worse more recently because after moving Ngakoue, who had led the team in sacks at that point. So you look at Andy Dalton too. So he wasn't even pressured, right? Like Dale said, four of his dropbacks, he's pressured. He still only threw for 6.3 yards per attempt. Like, I mean, against the Vikings, like everyone was still floor plays. They got him there and he made everyone usable, but it was just usable. So like the Cowboys, I don't think are gonna bury the football team here. So I mean, Gibson I think will be involved until he can't be. He had 20 touches. The season had 20 touches when these teams met. I doubt that they just completely shut them out and shut them down like they did the first time too. There was some weird weather in that game too. But I mean, I think they're going to get after Dalton a little bit more than the Vikings did. It's tricky. I mean, circling it back to Zeke though, I mean, we know one guy is, kind of projectable to get the most touches out of this position, and it's him, and he's not tough to fit in on any level. Where he probably would have been, a pretty good fade otherwise. We could have got creative. I remember last year, though, I mean, he was running hot and had a good matchup, and everyone played him, and he didn't score. So you just need him not to score if you don't play him, really. Like, you just need him not to get a touchdown, and you can really combat him. But the fact that we're removing a game from the slate gives you a lot of it makes it a lot leaner to get an edge.
That's the thing. If DeAndre Swift plays, he in my opinion is the number one option here in this entire slate. But if DeAndre Swift doesn't play, like Zeke's touches, even though they may be bad, are still probably priority here. So I will have him everywhere.
Yeah, and the knockdown from 3 games to 2 games also, like, you can break your correlation rules. Like, as you suggested, it's okay to play Gibson and like, you almost never would do that in an 11-game slate because there's so many other players and so many other spots that like a different combination is going to overtake it. But there's only so many guys can do things in a 2-game slate. And, like in showdown slates, you can break those traditional rules because goofy things happens in one-game slates and nobody else is around to overcome that or beat that sort of pattern. So, I think you can do it. Yeah, jump in here.
I think you even break like the tight end correlation on a 2-game slate that we know everyone's going to play because it's genuinely the most fun slate to play all year. Like normally you would stack your tight end with your quarterback. With only 2 games, hell, maybe you go to Washington Cowboys and then you do Hawkinson and then Duke Johnson maybe to get the touchdown equity. Volatile, of course, but the touchdown equity over Deshaun Watson, if that's the case too. So I think in this small slate, you don't need the quarterback to play the tight end either.
Yeah, and one of the other big strategies that we kind of lost, you kind of have it to some degree, but traditionally one of the biggest edges in the Thanksgiving Day slate is that there's 3 games at 3 different times and understanding how to pivot depending on how the first 2 games have gone for you.
Yep.
But, we've kind of sort of lost that to some degree. Yeah, I mean, you'll have you'll have one game to kind of work with and kind of get yourself out of a hole or try to play catch up and do something goofy that doesn't make any sense because, everybody in front of you has the better play, but you can't beat them if they have the same guy you have. Even if he scores 70 points, it doesn't work that way. The receivers in this game, what do you have for me, Rich, as far as the Washington side? I kind of mentioned McLaurin in passing. Daigle talked about Sims. I guess we should say Steven Sims if you want to get all technical. There's 2 Sims there. And then, of course, the Dallas guys are, big names, and they're pretty cheap.
Yeah, I mean, McLaurin's pretty easy when you look at Dallas. I mean, they got Chidobe Awuzie back last week. He didn't make any difference. They lost Trayvon Diggs. Anthony Brown now is expected to miss multiple weeks. It's just bad at the back end there. It's rough. They just don't have the bodies. It's really just McLaurin, though. It's hard to trust him. You look at his share of targets and air yards, it's really his show. So, I mean, it's hard to go to any of those guys. You really have to hope. If you're playing any other Washington pass catcher, you're really just chasing a touchdown. If they don't score a touchdown, there's nothing you're getting out of those guys. As far as like counting stats go, there's just not, the targets aren't there. And if Washington paces them, I mean, you look at, they had 28 dropbacks when these teams played the first time. Last week, they only had 27 dropbacks. You need them to fall behind. I mean, they're willing to throw it. We saw the previous 2 games when they fall behind. You just need Dallas to get out ahead in this game. So you need something to happen, whether it be a turnover, Dallas scores early. That's what you need to have happen. Dallas to get up if you're playing the Washington pass catching side that isn't Terry McLaurin. Because that's what you need. You need volume to kind of float those guys. The Cowboys, I mean, there's a pretty much a good amount of clarity what we have. I mean, the sample's still small, but I mean, Amari Cooper's been like a floor-based player. I mean, he has at least 5 catches or 67 yards in 4 of his 5 games post-Dak Prescott, but not much of a ceiling. But as far as the targets go from Andy Dalton, he's been easily the most efficient target. He's got 20 of 25 targets from Dalton, a team high 224 yards. Lamb is getting similar target volume to Cooper from Dalton, but the yardage and everything's been a lot more volatile. And he even had a 0 when these teams played the first time and was goosed. I will say he'll catch a pass tomorrow. But then you look at Washington, they're allowing a 3.4% touchdown rate to opposing wide receivers. That's 4th best in the league. Points per target, they're 4th best. Like they're not giving up a lot per target. And we just talked about Andy Dalton facing Minnesota, a team that's terrible on the back end and put no pressure on him. And he's under 6.5 yards per attempt. Like there's not a lot of ceiling for these guys. You need someone to break a big play. Because also when you look at Washington, in teams in the NFL this season, they've have run 24 plays inside the 10-yard line against them and just 11 plays inside the 5, the fewest of any team in the NFL. They will give up touchdowns, but they're long touchdowns. They give up big play touchdowns. And Dallas only has one guy that really gets downfield targets, and it's a guy no one's wanted to play all year outside of the one game he hit for us in Seattle. But I think if you really are playing a Dallas guy, the guy that has the most correlation to where the defense struggles is Michael Gallup, and he still leads the NFL. He's 2nd in the NFL in routes run, so he's out there exercising. He's the guy. I mean, he's the guy that lines up with where Washington gives up big plays in the receiving game. So, I mean, no one wants to play him. We haven't wanted to play him for over a month, but he's the guy that makes the most sense, to be honest.
Yeah, Daigle, put a bow on this. And as far as a slate, as far as the receivers, as far as this game, everything, we're going to move on as far as the main slate. And, yeah, can that Dallas line block long enough to let Gallup get downfield and actually throw the ball? Can Dalton give it to him? Does he have a chance to kind of break the slate?
I don't know. And honestly, Alex Smith is my 2nd favorite quarterback on this slate behind Deshaun Watson. Having said that, I will say, and this never works, by the way, I'm still going to be the donkey to talk about it, that remember CeeDee Lamb is the punt returner for the Cowboys. And we've only seen it work one time this year. Cordero Patterson, who had 14 touches, but was otherwise very bad outside of returning the kickoff for a touchdown. But CeeDee Lamb, Dallas Cowboys defense that's not going to get played on this slate, I think is a very interesting correlation.
Yeah, Cordell Patterson had that revenge game double dip on a showdown slate, which is like, wow. I mean, if you don't have it, just go to bed.
3 yards per touch is not revenge game, but sure, yeah. He returned the kickoff, yeah.
All right, let's move on as far as the main slate. Hey, yeah, if you guys are watching us on Friday, welcome to the main slate. If you guys are watching us live on a Wednesday night, what's up? Hey, YouTube, like, subscribe. Hopefully you guys you're enjoying. Maybe you have a night off, the day off tomorrow. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Have a good time. All right, what we do here on the show, we focus on usually 3 games with just 2 games this week because, again, we talked a lot about the Thanksgiving slate. The 2 featured games, batting first, leading off. We should say we're not talking about Monday night or Sunday night. We don't really have any takes. We're not going to be throwing them out there today as far as Seattle and Philly. That could be a fun game. Chicago and Green Bay as well. But KC and Tampa, it's high, it's tight, 56. Biggest total on the board, I believe. KC is a 1.5-point favorite here. All right, Rich. Mahomes, like the clear. I mean, he's just so much better than everybody else. It's completely insane. From a DFS perspective, how much are we prioritizing a guy like Mahomes? Of course, Allen we're going to talk about Allen in a second. The matchup there with the Chargers, it looks like a phenomenal DFS game to target as well, which, again, we're featuring that next. Kyle Murray, of course, on the slate as well, too. Hopefully his shoulder is all right. We shall see. It's just a Wednesday night. But let's start with Mahomes on Kansas City. We love him or what?
I mean, everyone loves Mahomes. It's this game in general is very interesting because, we've now seen this happen repeatedly where the Buccaneers have flamed on primetime, and their previous 3 losses, they've come back and scored 31, 38, and 46 points. The angry Tom narrative. I think Brady is interesting in this game, but let's talk about the Chiefs for a little bit. Because the Chiefs we're 11 weeks into the NFL season right now in the books. The Chiefs have only been on the main slate 5 times, and 1 was a bad weather game against Denver. So, they've kind of been out of sight, out of mind. We have not regularly been clicking the buttons on Chiefs guys throughout the course of the main slate. So, especially the last game against the Panthers, these guys came in way under-owned. I don't know if we'll get that again this week because they are expensive. It's not cheap to play these Chiefs guys, the horses. You got to pay all the way top dollar for them. But they really have not been on the main slate a lot. So, we haven't really been playing a lot of them. Their ownership tends to come in under. But from a schematic stance, I'm really curious to see how this game plays out. So the Buccaneers are naturally they smother the run and invite teams to throw on them. So you're inviting the best passer in the NFL to throw on you to start out, just inherently. And you look at the Chiefs. So they've thrown the ball on 61% of their first down plays outside the fourth quarter. It's the highest rate in the NFL. Opposing teams throw 62% of the time in neutral game script outside the fourth quarter on Tampa Bay, the highest rate in the league. So we've already got some symmetry of the Chiefs want to throw, and if you're going to invite them to throw, they're willing to throw, and it's not what you want them to do. Then we also have the Buccaneers. They blitz 38% of the time, the 5th highest rate in the league. The one thing you don't want to do, Patrick Mahomes, is just send extra defenders. He has just destroyed the blitz over his career. This year's no different. He's averaging 9.4 yards per attempt versus the blitz as opposed to 7.8 otherwise. That's why we've seen a lot of teams just drop back and play shell coverage against them throughout the course of the season. They've tried to invite them to run. The Chiefs have kind of pivoted the last few weeks. They did it against Carolina. They did it against the Jets. They said, no, we're just going to keep throwing on you. We don't care. You're going to invite us to run. We don't care. We're just going to throw. And that's what they've done the past 3 games. And the Buccaneers are going to invite them to do that. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. I'll pivot back to the other side, but just when you look at like I said, the Buccaneers have clapped back after every loss. And the Chiefs have been the 2 past quarterbacks that they've faced have paced them, Derek Carr and Teddy Bridgewater, over 30 points. I think Brady had, especially in this slate where there are not a lot of cheapies. I think Derek Carr is a cheapie, what we might talk about later. But I think Brady's is in play if you're stacking this game. I think he can bounce back and have a really good game. We know he has the weaponry. There's a lot of stacking potential here. I don't think anyone's going to want to play Brady because he's just getting dunked on for the month, for the past week. He's getting dunked on. His head coach is dunking on him. I think Brady is pretty interesting.
He doesn't know what down it is sometimes. Yeah, well.
We did this against the Panthers, right? Brady had a primetime game, came back in a normal slate, and then he just dunked on the Panthers for 330 and 4 touchdowns. This is what he does. To be fair, I really do not think it's a real thing that he already admitted, reporters, of course, they already have the article that he goes to bed at 8:30 p.m. Eastern every night. So I don't think it's a real narrative that he sucks in prime time because he goes to bed. Having said that, I think it's funny as hell that he's averaged 5.7 per attempt in prime time with 5 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. And every game, like Rich said, he bounces back because they're never in back-to-back primetime games, at least yet, this season. So I think it's a tremendous
This is 25 for what it's worth. It's not a night game, but it's not a
It's
day
hilarious.
game.
It's hilarious that he's so bad on island games. So, like, if it's like a Eskimo or whatever who just shows up to America and they tune into TV on football, they see the Bucks on primetime only, and they're like, this team sucks. Why are they ever on primetime? Well, buddy, you got to watch them in the afternoon slate because they're amazing if you watch them out of the night games. Anyways, to Rich's point, he took the good ones already. But the fact is, last 3 weeks, the Chiefs have changed their motivation pretty much to win Patrick Mahomes the MVP and move the ball the most efficient way possible. The highest pass play rate in the league overall, the highest pass play rate in the league, neutral gain script, and most importantly, highest pass play rate in the league whenever we're leading the game. So I think I don't know what you have in ownership on your end, Dean, but like if Mahomes, who has come in under-rostered the past 2 times he's been on the main slate because everyone gets too cute with Chiefs' implied team total and rosters Clyde Edwards-Helaire instead, like Mahomes is still the GOAT every main slate, especially now that the approach is clearly there for him.
The next game we talk about will have the 2 highest projected owner quarterbacks, Buffalo and the Chargers.
Oh, yeah.
But and again, this is Wednesday night. Things happen. It's fluid, yada, yada, yada. I got to throw that out there. And I ran my 300 lineups, and Mahomes popped up in one optimal lineup, which is absolutely crazy. And we're seeing 3% ownership for 3% ownership for Brady. And the ownership right now is super early, obviously.
But Brady's never going to show up in a good projection right now because they're overweighting the Chiefs defense. So the Chiefs defense is good. But you know when the Chiefs defense is good? When they're ahead. The Chiefs are really good when they get out to, a double-digit point lead and Spags is just dialing up blitzes. But when you can pace the Chiefs and you can keep game script in your favor and you can run the ball, they give up yards. Like they do not have a lot of individual defenders that shut down opposing defenses. Like Chris Jones is awesome, Tyrann Mathieu is awesome, and it's like a bunch of guys. But when they get up 10 points, they get up 17 points like they do in all these games, they just dial up blitzes because you can't run the ball on them anymore because of game script, and they're just sending extra defenders all the time. But when you have, and they're in game script like they've been these last 2 weeks, you see it. Teams can matriculate on them easily. They're not like a great defense in neutral game script. They got to get out to those leads that their offense puts them to. That's when their defense is good.
And why I prioritize this game over the Chargers-Bills, which I love, by the way, but I want the ancillary pieces in that game, and I want to target this game, is because Bucs secondary is also being overrated of late. Derek Carr, 280 and 2 touchdowns. Daniel Jones, 250 and 2 touchdowns. Brees, 220 and 4 touchdowns. Teddy Bridgewater, 130 and 2 touchdowns before he was injured mid-game. And then this past week, Jared Goff, 370 and 3 touchdowns. So clearly, no matter what they do against Mahomes, he can still attack and win. And that's why I want this game over the other one we're going to talk about.
Rich,
I'm glad. You look at the Bucs defense, and I think that their stigma is definitely outweighed, especially the last several weeks. They have a game, in week 6, they just blow the doors off Aaron Rodgers. You look at the amount of yardage they're allowing per week. The Raiders got them for 350. The Giants had 360 on them. The Giants should have beat them. I mean, if Daniel Jones he sees a wide open Darius Slate and he's got like a 70-yard walking touchdown. The Saints put up the Saints put up 420 yards against them, basically not even trying in the second half. Carolina, the first half, put 17 points up in the first half before, Bridgewater gets hurt. And, and the Panthers they suck in the second half anyways, every game. And then the Rams put up 400 yards on them last week. This Bucs defense is giving up a ton of yards, since that Rodgers game.
Evans, Brown, Godwin, Gronk. Who do I pair with Brady? Is anybody kind of jumping off the page, or it's kind of like the Colts, but like a better version of? We don't know.
Mike Evans, Antonio Brown have 26 targets each, a 20.8% target share in the last 3 full games, or the only 3 full games, I should say, they play together. Chris Godwin has 22 targets as a span. The issue, of course, is that Mike Evans, like Adam Thielen, like Devontae Adams, is being prioritized where we want the targets. 9 red zone targets, 5 end zone targets, compared to EB and Godwin's combined 2. Just 1 red zone target each in that span. Brady looks to Evans whenever they reach inside the red zone, and then it's very clear who he's going to throw to. So that is the number 1 receiver among this group.
Last week we talked about no opportunity cost at tight end, unless, of course, you're playing on FanDuel where you just lock in Taysom. Tight end was an absolute disaster on the main slate for DK, missing all the top tight ends. Ingram, Kelsey. Kelsey's back. Waller's back on the slate.
Andrews was good.
Andrews and Hawkinson, the two. Well, Hawkinson was
50-yard Hawkinson. That's what he does every week.
So how much do we prioritize Kelsey? He can separate himself in the slate. He can score 10 more fantasy points than every other tight end. Rich, of course, he's expensive. He's going to be the normal salary cap. He's pricey. How much do we delegate? How much do we prioritize at Kelsey?
It seems like a lot of people have gone with the angle of going cheap tight end, right? Just going cheap tight end, basically punting tight end. But what if the play is to go cheap wide receiver 3 and start paying for Kelsey? Because if you look at Kelsey, he's scoring as many PPR points per game as Keenan Allen. So, if he's not going to be priced, and he is on DK, I think he's 8 or he's 7. I mean, I might be mistaken. He might be 8 on FanDuel and then 7 on DK. But if he's not – but he's basically a top 5 wide receiver, though, basically is what I'm saying. So why not take him for maybe $1,000 of savings that you typically would have to pay for a top receiver and punt at wide receiver who has a higher ceiling than a punt tight end? I can play Denzel Mims at 3,500 on DK, and he's got a way higher ceiling than any tight end I'm going to play at 3K. So maybe you pay for Kelsey. Maybe that's the move. I mean, look at the amount of just points. He has 380 more receiving yards than the next tight end. He's scoring like a top 5 wide receiver per week. Already beat his touchdown total from last year. Already beat his end zone targets from last year. I mean, the guy is just a locked in entity basically at this point. So I mean, maybe the play is to pivot and punt wide receiver 3, play Kelsey instead of, paying for a wide receiver and then, punting tight end. He's just he's so far ahead, the best tight end. But so maybe that's the play. I do got a mea culpa. I think a few weeks ago, Dean, we talked about Tyreek Hill, and I talked about how he had been like a floor player wide receiver. Yeah. And since then, since that point, he's starting to get just jammed with targets. Over his opening 6 games of the season, he had 6 or fewer targets in every game but 1. Now you look at the past 4 games, 10 targets, 18 targets, 14 targets. Now, if Tyreek Hill's going to start getting that many targets for his upside, I mean, we're talking that because he can always be a guy that hits on 6 targets. But, man, we're talking about the kind of targets he's getting lately, that amount of volume. It's amazing he hasn't put up like a 170 yet, or he's scoring a ton of touchdowns. But it's amazing he hasn't put up like a really bonkers yardage game with the amount of volume that he's getting. And we already talked about they're going to drop back and throw a lot in this game. Even if they want to run, they're not going to be able to. So, I mean, Tyreek has really come on. He scored a touchdown in every game but once this season. But I just look at the volume he started to get compared to the front of the season, and there's a big tide shift in just the amount of targets he's starting to see.
Even if, you don't play Mahomes, but you run Hill and Kelsey, and then you run it back with the lower rostered double stack of Brady, Brown, and Evans, it's so interesting. This game in particular, I absolutely love this week. And again, that means probably you don't get to roster Dalvin Cook in this slate. But if you have the high-powered passing offenses, I prefer that anyhow, and I'll find the running backs.
High-powered passing offenses, at least the fantasy quarterbacks we want a piece of for sure. Justin Herbert at Josh Allen. The Chargers at the Bills, 52.5 is the total. The Bills are a 5.5-point favorites. Hribar, you want to start us off as far as this matchup?
Well, I mean, this is it. I mean, you kind of hit on it. It's Herbert and Allen, and the reason they're owned is we're talking about always touchdown equity. 86.3% of the touchdowns the Chargers have scored, Justin Herbert is accounted for via passing or rushing. Josh Allen's at 84%. That is 3rd in the NFL. So, I mean, when these teams score, the quarterbacks are doing it. So that's why they're going to be high owned. Also, the Chargers, they just don't play normal games. They've allowed 28 or more. They've allowed 28 or more points in 7 straight games. And look at these past 5 games, some of the teams they've played. the Jets, the Dolphins, the Broncos, the Jaguars. Like they're playing shootouts with teams that do not shoot out with anybody.
Yeah.
It's really wild. It's interesting because the Chargers are like, their defense shows up to be good on a peripheral, like per play basis, but they give up a ton of passing touchdowns still. They're good from like a yards per attempt perspective, but they have a lot of touchdowns. They find a way. Like, teams find a way to score points on them. Josh Allen is coming off of the bye where he was a top 5 quarterback again the previous 2 weeks. I mean, it's a game that's set up to be very high scoring. Herbert has been so good. I mean, 20 or more points the past 7 games. Through 9 starts, he has the most passing yards in NFL history. He's 3rd in touchdown passes. He's 2nd in amount of games with multiple touchdown passes. Only Kurt Warner has more through 9 starts. Buffalo is allowing a league-high 57% completion rate on throws 15 yards or further downfield. Herbert is 3rd in the NFL in fantasy points on those throws, only behind Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. I mean, this game, it has what you're looking for. The weather's supposed to be good in Buffalo. Yeah, I mean, it's set up. It's set up. And I think the Bills are probably more narrative street. Like, they've been sitting on that Hail Mary loss for 2 weeks. I think they're going to come out and play well. I'm looking at this game, and it's like, yep, there's a reason why all this ownership is going to be here, especially surrounding those 2 quarterbacks.
And remember, like, nothing in Buffalo happens without it planning to happen, because Brian Daigle is too intelligent of a play caller. And in the 2 weeks before their bye, Josh Allen had 87 pass attempts to 22 running back carries. They just started putting it all on his shoulders and said, screw it, kid. Go out there and get it done. And it's been amazing for fantasy. So against this team, Rich said over 29, 30 points the past 4 games. I'll take it back to week 4. They've allowed 30.8 points per game, and that's a 7-game sample to opposing offenses in that span. So Chargers, due to injuries most likely, have not been a good defense, and now they're getting Josh Allen and a pass-heavy attack. It's an amazing game as well, honestly.
We're not sure as far as some injuries. Eckler may come back. Stay tuned on that. If he doesn't, I think Balaja is certainly interesting. It's still a reasonable price. He scared a lot of us last week when he got hurt in the very first play or the very first series, but he did come back like a champ. Wasn't spectacular, but at least he gave us a score. John Brown also not practicing just yet. And yeah, let's not bury the lead as far as the receivers. Diggs and Allen on both sides. I believe they're 1-2 in the league as far as targets. Both absolutely spectacular plays. Great to, cash game pieces if they fit the build for sure. I love them as far as the floor. Anything else here, Daigle, as far as this game, or shall we move on?
No, I mean, a lot, actually. Stephon Diggs, his 2 games without John Brown. Stephon Diggs, targets per game. It's only 2 games, of course, but they've jumped from 9.5 to nearly 14 per game, a 4 target per game jump. So the targets are there for Stephon Diggs, of course. Cole Beasley in those 2 games has gone from typically 49th in fantasy points per game among wide receivers to 15th among all wide receivers without John Brown. And then Tre'Davious White for Keenan Allen. You're still probably confident in Keenan Allen anyways. And not to get Rich started on a tangent again, but Tre'Davious White has only moved to the slot for 13 snaps all year. So Keenan Allen, who has seen double-digit targets in every game except that game against the Dolphins from Justin Herbert this year, minus the game got injured mid-game, of course. It's pretty clear where he's going to go. Kalen Ballage, DNP on Wednesday. Austin Eckler, on the other hand, practiced on Wednesday. So maybe it's a little bit clearer than we think as well. So, yeah, I think the target tree is simple here, honestly.
Well, Ballage got hurt at the end of the game as well. It wasn't just early in the game. He also got hurt at the end of the game as well. I believe it was the final drive he got hurt, which kind of went under the radar. But I was making sure to earmark it to follow him in practice this week, because he also, I don't know if it was a re-injury or the same injury, but he came off. It might have been his last touch of the game. Came off the field. I would say John Brown never has practiced on Wednesday all season, so you got to wait till tomorrow.
Yeah,
he hasn't practiced on Wednesday all season, so we've got to wait to see what happens. But Big Mike's been coming along for the ride. Listen, man, Big Mike, at least 7 targets in 4 of his past 6 games, double-digit points. He's got like a 4-yard game to keep us honest. You never go all the way in with Big Mike. But the thing about Mike Williams is, and you're like, well, yeah, he plays 70% of his routes on the outside. Like, the types of targets he gets, it doesn't matter who the hell's on him. Like, he gets vertical targets and he gets end zone targets, and they're all 50-50 balls anyways. You don't really care. We're never playing Big Mike and Cash anyways. But he's been coming along for the ride and starting to hit his stride here, the past, 6 weeks as well. As Herbert has kind of started to trickle it down. Even Hunter Henry has gotten in the box the last 2 weeks. The yardage isn't there, but a lot of people in season-long leagues will just take their touchdown from their tight end and run. It used to be like old fantasy college where when you had to roster a tight end, and if your guy scored, you're just so happy. You're like, oh, thank God. I just got a touchdown for my tight end. That's kind of where we are this year if you don't have Travis Kelce or Darren Waller.
Yeah. I don't know why I was so antsy to move on from this game. We're a little bit behind on time. We went long as far as Thanksgiving. And I think, you know what the reason why? I wanted to get to our ad read. The holidays are here. Have you made your wish list yet? Our sponsor today has the number one wished for gift of the year. It's Manscaped. You guys know Manscaped, the best in men's below and above the belt grooming. Manscaped is here to ensure you're taking care of your manhood and your nose hairs with their new performance package. Ho, 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 fellas. Naughty or nice, 'tis the season to perform. It's Christmas season. If you're having issues downstairs, if you're having issues upstairs, you're in luck because Manscaped Performance Package is the ultimate men's hygiene bundle and makes for the perfect gift. Imagine opening an attractive box that says, your balls will thank you. That says it right there. I'm not making that up. That's not an ad lib. It apparently says, I'm told, according to this transcript, the box says your balls will thank you. So there you go. With the most sought after gadgets and scents a person could find, it includes, including this package, it's the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, which is waterproof and uses a 9,000 RPM motor-powered 360-degree rotary dual blade system. That's like the Dalvin Cook of Weed Whackers. There you go. Here's the deal, guys. 79% of partners polled admitted that long nose hair is a major turnoff. Why not use the best tools for the job here? By the way, just 79%. What are the other 21%? They're into that? I mean,
21% of sick people.
I mean, I'm not here to judge. If everybody's happy and everybody's having a good time, by all means, I've had it. But, whatever. To each his own. This bundle also includes the Lawnmower 3.0 trimmer, the best trimmer on the market for your balls, your butt, your body, all freebies. The dads can't stop talking about it. The teens, I'm told, again, this is what it says. The teens are secretly buying it. The women love it. 'Tis the season to Manscaped to get yourself, your dad, your brother, friends, anybody, the best gift of all, the Manscaped Performance Package. Let's also not forget their famous. We don't want to forget anything. There's a big old list. Let's not forget their famous liquid formulations, the Crop Preserver, ball deodorant, and Crop Reviver, ball toner. I'm Crop Reviver. All right. There you go. Ball toner to maximize your ball hygiene routine. Get the Performance Package now to receive not one, but 2 free gifts, the Manscaped Boxers and the Shed Travel Bag. The Performance Package is the best value that Manscaped has to offer and is hot off the shelves. How do I get this? 20% off, free shipping. How do you do it? Go to manscaped.com. Use the promo code ROTO. That's ROTO. Thank you, Manscaped, for making our holes look sexy. A line I've never said in my life. Once again, 20% off, free shipping, promo code ROTO, ROTO, at manscaped.com. Go whack your weeds and make Santa proud. If you think Santa would use it, he probably could. I don't know what's going on downstairs, but upstairs, who might have said? But he probably could use it. Sure, why not? All right, seamless segue.
Oh, not at all.
I'm going to get a drink. I'm exhausted. Rich, some quarterbacks we haven't talked about. Who's popping up the page for you?
Most of the guys on main slate I'm going to play, we talked about in those games. Obviously, I'm going to follow a lot of those. And like I said, I think Brady's my undercover guy. I think Derek Carr is interesting. Obviously, we've been down this road before, and we need Julio to play just because the Falcons have been so bad when Julio hasn't played. There's probably more to it than that, but I'm just going to run with it. They've been awful when Julio hasn't played. But Atlanta has allowed a league high 20.3 passing points per game to opposing quarterbacks. They've allowed 18 or more fantasy points to every quarterback they face except for Teddy Bridgewater. Seems to make a lot of sense. The Raiders' offense is good. Obviously, Carr is not a guy that's probably going to crash a lot of high ceilings, but he's fine for the most part. Also, going back to just Kelce for 1 second, Kelce outscored Taysom Hill at tight end last week. He outscored a quarterback Just so you know how good Travis Kelce is, he outscored a quarterback.
I did not get to join y'all for Sunday morning, but on the RotoWorld Sunday morning show, I said I'm starting Taysom Hill every tight end except Travis Kelce because I think his floor is higher. So shout out to me.
How do we feel about Taysom this week, by the way? Obviously, he's no longer tight end eligible on FanDuel. They bumped him up on DK, bumped him up in FanDuel, but still playable. Not just, not an amazing matchup here, against Denver, perfectly fine on the road, out of the dome, which I don't like either. And, in theory, he's got legs. He can run like 50 yards or so or something like that. He was efficient. People were trashing him, but he was efficient from what I saw. And he had that 50-yard bomb down the field. He kind of sort of got lucky on, I guess. And not passing the ball with to Alvin Kamara was a bold choice, Cotton. I don't know.
We only ran 11 pass routes.
What is that going to be fixed, or is that the game plan? What's going on there?
You have two things. Remember, he did not practice on Thursday, and he said, "No, I'm fine," and then practiced on Friday, but he didn't practice in that toe injury. And his snaps, he had the lowest snap share of the season, and he only ran 11 pass routes. So, I mean, he might be a little more ailing than we thought. Obviously, too, we have a mobile quarterback, which, it's tried and true. Like, we've seen this before with mobile quarterbacks. You don't always check it down. You're going to run yourself. You're going to take off. They didn't run any designed runs in the first half of that game. Granted, they started scoring their touchdowns when they started adding designed runs. I mean, you proved your point, Sean. You didn't score. You had 3 points at halftime. You proved your point, and you start scoring touchdowns when you start running designed runs. I mean, I thought Taysom, obviously he was a better passer than I think many of us thought he might be in that game. Still made a lot of mistakes. I mean, he was better like when he could just play. I thought when he was like under structure and to read defenses, his processing was slow. And I'm no quarterback guru. I mean, you talked to Matt Waldman about this, but I thought when he had to make plays and there was pressure and he had to move and just play, he was better. That's when I thought he made made plays that I was like, oh, this can really work for him. But other than that, I mean, you look at this matchup. I think this is a game where he's going to have to run though. Obviously, he just faced we just talked about the Falcons. I just did with Derek Carr. They're awful. They've given up points to everybody. Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles scored 30 fantasy points against them. The Denver they've got a defensive-minded head coach. Vic Fangio is going to have something for him. We saw he had something for Tua last week. The Saints are a better defense or better offense than what the Dolphins are going to put out, especially on the offensive line. But Denver is third in the league in pressure rate. They have 28 sacks. That's seventh in the league. They're a terrible run defense. So, I mean, I would assume the game plan is going to involve more RPOs, more Taysom Hill running this week than it did last week because Denver is just a way better pass defense than the Falcons, and you're on the road. Something about playing in that stadium is a little different as well. I think he's still a good, solid floor play because I think he's going to run more. But I think that the matchup is definitely a lot harder, and we'll see a lot more proven as far as his passing acumen goes in this matchup.
I think it's Julio Jones' presence. Like, if Julio Jones plays, Derek Carr's the better cheapy play because we know Derek Carr is going to have to punch back. He punched back for over 30 attempts last week against Mahomes, which is what we expected. But remember, in 3 games prior, averaged 24 pass attempts per game. But if Julio Jones doesn't play, we've seen Matt Ryan 2 full games that Julio be the QB 26 and 27 of the week, and thus Derek Carr will go back to fewer than 24 pass attempts per game, and it'll be a Josh Jacobs and respectively Devontae Booker game. And Taysom Hill will be the better cheap play. Having said that, as much fun as Taysom Hill was, and do not mistake that, Taysom Hill was the most fun I've had all year long, whether it was him rocketing the ball at the line of scrimmage or rocketing the ball underthrown 50 yards deep. He was amazing to watch play. 6 for 6 under pressure, by the way. And the Falcons created the 7th highest pressure rate of the entire week last week. Having said that, the Broncos still, like Reeve said, 3rd highest pressure rate in the league. Also, altitude matters more than home field advantage this year. And so that's what I'm worried about. A 30-year-old making his first career road start in altitude. So a little bit skeptical to both those cheap guys.
Yeah, it's easy to forget he's 30. He was in college for 6 years or something like that. And I think he.
Well, BYU, they go on the mission.
Yeah. Kyler's probably going to be ignored, I think, which is kind of sort of somewhat interesting. New England's been vulnerable. I know they're getting what Seymour's going to be. Is that the secondary? I don't quarterback wide receiver matchups. Gilmore, yeah. Who might
they did have Richard Seymour for a long period of time.
He's on NBC now, or like CBS, something like that.
He would be like their 12th best defender right now, give or take. But all right, any other quarterbacks you have for us, Daigle? You want to pivot to open up some running backs for us?
I'm looking at my notes because I forgot what I wrote down. Rich, you go first. I got to find my stuff.
I mean, listen, no one needs to tell you guys to play the Browns running backs, especially because, the Browns, they run the ball on 63% of their first down plays. Outside the fourth quarter, it's second in the league. They're going to run. Jaguars have trailed for the most plays in the NFL. Pretty easy to play the Browns, guys. On DraftKings, I know it's going to upset the YouTube chat, so plug your ears for a minute. On DraftKings, James White is $4,500. Rex Burkhead, now obviously pour one out for Rex Burkhead. He is out for the season, so there is no one else to play this role in this offense now. And we've seen it. He caught 6 of 7 targets for 64 yards. He played 39 snaps, ran 20 pass routes, his highest in a game since week 4. The Patriots are dogs at home. $4,500. There's not a lot of cheap plays on this slate. I'm not playing Wayne Gallman, guys. I'm not doing it. I don't care. Someone else can talk about him. Because if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's going to be terrible. James White cannot score and still be good at $4,500. I think he is a really solid play. He has no threat to hit that role now when he didn't even have the role, which is crazy.
What happens if they're up by 10 or something like that, though? Then is it like just Harris running the ball a ton and maybe some Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, do we believe that that's going to happen? Like, what's the probability? They just lost to a team that had only beaten the Jaguars.
Also, like for James White, that's why I love James White game script for this 1 week, because the Patriots haven't stopped anybody with an arm, right? And maybe Kyler Murray doesn't have an arm because he's been limited or didn't practice at all with that shoulder injury from Thursday night. But if he can throw, this Patriots defense is a bottom 5 unit, honestly. Derek Carr, Russ Wilson, anyone but Lamar Jackson has been successful against them. Even Joe Flacco 3 weeks ago. So, I love Kyler Murray as well. Not only for the rushing floor, but assuming he's healthy, I think he can easily attack them through the air.
And they're dead last in yards for pass play. The Patriots are last in the NFL. They're dead last.
Yeah, they've been horrendous for sure. And Dalvin Cook, that's a foundation piece in your cash games. Obviously, a really good tournament play as well too. I'm not really sure how it's going to land as far as ownership because it's pending, what sort of value may or may not open up as the week progresses. Thielen is currently questionable. Who knows what's going to happen with him as far as go ahead.
I'll be willing to go perhaps to my own defeat, but Kamara overcooked this week in tournaments. Ooh. Not only $1,300 cheaper this week, so last week was $9,500 and $9,200, right? I think that was the price. They were very similar on DraftKings. But also, everyone's now scared that the target share is what Kamara is going to lose with Taysom Hill. But again, Reeves pointed it out, the first time all year that Murray out-snapped Kamara, the first time all year that Murray out-touched Kamara, and to only run 11 pass routes is, egregious. Clearly, that's not his role going forward. One of the most talented players in the entire league. So I want to play literally Alvin Kamara 100% of leagues this week, 100%.
What about James Robinson, who plays basically 100% of the snaps for Jacksonville? And I know they had a quarterback change from Jake Luton. You got to see what you have in Mike Glennon. You never know. What was his quote? I don't think I saw his quote today. Basically saying, look, I don't know when the next time I'm going to start again. I'm just gonna chuck. Basically, is what he said.
He said, I don't know the next time I'm going to start. I'm going to air it out. Amazing quote, by the way. Almost as good as Drew Lock's quote 2 weeks ago where he said 50% of his throws, 50% of his throws when he throws them, he says, oh no. Only a coin flip, by the way. Only half of them, he regrets them.
Yeah. Glennon's made 22 starts. He's never thrown more than 2 touchdowns in any start.
Amazing.
Wow.
Great.
That's, keep catching it. And he's been around for probably 10 years.
He hasn't made a start since 2017, but only 22 career starts because he's been so bad.
These comments make me sound negative, but seriously, have we ever seen more teams just give up in 2020? The Bengals going to Brandon Allen. They had Ryan Finley active as the number 2 all year long, and they're not even going to him now. They're going to Brandon Allen instead, which makes it more like a Wayne dominant.
Yeah, Brendan Allen, I was looking at his college stats earlier today. I was curious if he can run if he has got any wheels, but it appears that that's not a case. That's not a thing. And he's super cheap. And, Yeah. What's the is that just a tank mode thing? Like what is that what's going on there?
Don't even look at his college stats. Look at his 46% completion rate from last year. That's all you need to see. It doesn't matter.
Any other running backs that are worth throwing out there? I know. Did you want to tout Gallman? Clearly, Rich has no interest in hyping up the great Wayne Gallman. It's a good matchup, and he's cheap, but yeah, it's Wayne Gallman.
I don't know if he's going to be in my running back pool, and I'll talk about him because I genuinely don't know at this time. I would not talk about him if he was completely out. But the pros are clearly that he's living off of, as Reeves says, touchdown deodorant. He scraped himself with it, and Amazon warehouse may run out very soon. We don't know. But a season-high 19 touches without Devontae Freeman before the bye, and a very good game script because we know Brandon Allen's going to be bad. We know that. We know the Giants are going to run the ball, and Devontae Freeman on IR. So that's the point you're trying to sell yourself if you play Gallman. Again, more of like Damian Harris last week, more of a FanDuel play than a DraftKings play because he's not going to catch passes either.
I love the idea of playing a defense against Mike Glennon in YOLO mode, but no Myles Garrett hurts him to some degree, obviously, as far as Cleveland, and they're still probably in play, but just not that we talk defenses, but just the idea of Glennon back there just saying, screw it. I don't know.
I mean,
with his Jay Cutler, a cigarette in his mouth. Don't care.
I don't think Myles Garrett matters for Mike Glennon, to be honest. It doesn't matter.
Running backs.
Yeah, no Denzel Ward either.
Are we done as far as running backs? Or shall we talk about some receivers you like?
Sure.
Rich?
What wide receivers?
Feel free.
Well, I mean, listen, what's that? Well, oh yeah. Well, I mean, literally, if people are gonna keep trying to jam Dalvin Cook in, and his price went up again, then it just like last week, you just got to play Minnesota passing guys in tournaments, and then you as leverage. You just have to. If he's that high owned and he's that expensive, you play Thielen if he plays. You play Justin Jefferson. You just got to do it, man, because you have to hope that he doesn't score a touchdown, or if he does, he has to work for it and doesn't have a super high ceiling. And he was great last week anyways. But if you can get these the leverage plays, the passing game there, I think running that back on the other side now that Teddy's going to play, those Panthers wide receivers are always in play. They're a little tougher to nail. DJ Moore has matched Robbie Anderson in weighted opportunity rating for the season. He's at 18 targets the past 2 games. Obviously the narrative on DJ Moore's season has been false, from the beginning. But in his past 7 games, he's had 93 or more receiving yards in 5 of them. Anderson has had 77 yards or fewer in every game since week 5. Anderson hasn't had a end zone target since week 5. He has 3 end zone targets on the season. DJ Moore has 7. He's got to score from far away, basically is what I'm saying. So I think those guys in a game stack is interesting. Michael Pittman, are we going to run this back? He's pretty cheap. Got in the box last week on the long play. Had 100 yards against the Titans. So I don't know if Adoree Jackson, the myth of Adoree Jackson, is ever going to come true that he's going to play. And then if you want, you have the error yards guys, not the air yards, the error yards.
I say prayer yards, but I like air yards as well.
Yeah, air yards. You have Jerry Jeudy, who we can keep citing his error yards till we're blue in the face, but only 56% of his targets are catchable. I'd like to see his air yards on catchable targets to know what we're working with. And then Denzel Mims is arbitrage air yards under Jeudy. Because he's got 458 air yards since he came in since he was active, but only 54% of his targets have been catchable. So we've got a lot of air yards to work
every
with.
Snap he plays, basically. He's in the field for every snap. He runs a ton of routes, and he's super cheap.
He's 3,500. So
Perryman has 21 A-dot, and Mims has a 20 A-dot. Like, literally, Joe Flacco drops back, and it's a 50-50 ball every game. The difference in this matchup is that Byron Jones on one side, Xavier Howard on the other. No one has been more prepared for air balls or air yards than the Dolphins secondary. It's going to be a disaster.
Well, Flacco already started against the Dolphins too. It did not go well.
Okay. Let me throw out one more cheapie into the conversation. KJ Hamler, thoughts on is he kind of
more
like
air yards?
Yeah, he's 3.5K DK specific, which seems like a cheapie. It's interesting in play. And then how about the recency bias potentially, a revenge game also built in here? Jacoby Myers and Demir Byrd. What are we doing with that? Bird 4.1K, Myers 5.3 against Arizona. If you're going to run it back, if you're playing some Kyler or something like that, any of those guys doing anything for you for anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I like Jacoby Myers a lot. As we know in DFS, you always run back the guy who fails 1 week and comes back, but has been proven. And remember, the 3 games prior to last week, Jacoby Myers still 40% target share in all 3 of those games, and then comes back and Demir Bird gets more targets. So I would happily go back to Bird and a negative projected, in my opinion, in my brain, negative game script, because as we talked about earlier, the Patriots have not been able to stop any competent quarterback this year. They've played some very bad ones, but against league average ones or better, they've been terrible. So Jacoby Myers, absolutely. I would love to go back to him.
Rich?
Sure.
That means, he's not playing him. That means he's not playing him at all.
I mean, listen,
you did not sell that at all. Where was the first
last week? That was the first touchdown Cam Newton threw to a wide receiver all season.
You called it.
People have been citing, Demir Bird regression for 10 weeks. You got it. Get out now. Just you got it. You finally circled the wagon.
Nobody circles the wagon.
No, I'm fine with either guy. I really don't have any pushback on either guy.
I'm not going to play Bird, but I will play Myers.
I think they're fine.
The Dolphins guys are playable. I think Parker and Grant, I think, are playable. I saw somebody in chat talking about playing Rivers. What's up, chat? Feel free to like and subscribe, the whole deal. Hit the like button, smash it, whatever.
I talked about this. I talked about Rivers on my show last week on how there was just such an obvious signal to play Rivers, but he's just so hard to stack, because half of his touchdowns have gone to these jabroni tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
Pittman at least is starting to give us some intrigue here for stacking. But the Colts are just guys. Like their offense is just guys. So you just there's a reason why it keeps bouncing around. Like they don't have any stars. And maybe Pittman turns into that, and maybe down the road Jonathan Taylor does that and builds his game. But you look at Rivers, he's been playing really well. And it's in really obvious spots. Teams that can't rush the passer on any level. Bengals, Lions, Packers, Titans. Then he had a dud against who? The Ravens, who blitz a ton, get after people. It's pretty easy. I think Rivers is another good play. He's just so hard to stack because he can throw 3 touchdown passes to 3 different dudes that aren't even owned by anybody. But I agree that he is an objectively good play.
Nobody had more than 4 catches last week. Nobody has more than a 17% share of this entire team. It's a mess. And Pittman, I think, is the most appealing play if you're going to play somebody. I don't mind Davis on the other side in that game for what it's worth. I think he's got a reasonable tag at 4.9. Daigle, we're going to move the tight ends in a second, but the chat.
What about the big dog? We didn't talk. You mentioned that DeForest Buckner is going to be out now for this game, and we saw what the big dog did with Calais Campbell and Brandon Williams out last week. I mean, he's going to get the ball. We know that. And, no DeForest Buckner is kind of a big loss in that game.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, for tournaments, for sure, as far as Henry. And, I haven't built the cash game lineup yet, but in my head, he feels like more of a tournament guy, especially on DK, where he's got to crack 100. He's got to get in the box because he's basically not going to catch the football, unfortunately. Daigle, you got anybody else as far as running backs, or receivers, or shall we talk about some tight ends? We always finish strong. If you don't have the funds, for Kelsey. I think Waller's a really good pivot. Nice matchup as well, too. We talked about, Carr, good pairing there. It's a combination platter. Some cheapy tight ends. Anybody do anything for you?
Quickly on wide receivers, A.J. Brown, I think, is another good play. We saw Devontae Adams still spike that zone defense of the Colts secondary. I think A.J. Brown's another terrific position. Now at least 7 targets, and every game he's been healthy for, except for 2 weeks ago where he failed, but also remember he dropped that touchdown. Otherwise, the box score would look different. So A.J. Brown's still a usage-based wide receiver 1. Cheapy tight ends, honestly, only one. If Julio Jones is out, that's Hayden Hurst. Having said that, I will preface this with Hayden Hurst in 2 games without Julio Jones had 9 total yards, despite running 90% of routes on Ryan's dropback. So be careful. The thing is, he's still 3,900. F it, it's tight end. Who gives a crap about tight end? Just play Kelsey or fade the chalk. It's literally the 2 options there. So that's my take.
Rich?
Yeah, pretty much that. Just from a philosophy stance, I think Jordan Reed is kind of interesting. Nobody wants to play him, but I mean, he's cheap. I think Evan Ingram's in a good spot. I mean, he's been in a ton of good spots. I get it if no one wants to play Evan Ingram. But I think it's a good place against, the Bengals have a lot of 5 tight end 1 scoring weeks, some big games, the tight ends. So I think he's in play as well. But yeah, Jordan Reed is a cheapie. I think if you really wanted to punt, was good against in that Saints game. The Rams defense is always a tricky spot, but I mean, we know what the 49ers are going to do. They're going to try to run their offense and he'll get some targets.
Yeah, I see in the chat here they were asking about San Francisco and they want to know about Debo and Mostert, and you're bringing up Jordan Reed. And I mean, yeah, it's a cheap tight end, but I don't know about Debo. And I guess in tournaments anybody's been playing 19 team total here for San Francisco. Obviously not an ideal target team we're looking at, but anything can happen. Do those guys do anything for you? Or I guess if you're going to play one, it's going to be Jordan Reed.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jordan Reed 3.6. I mean,
yeah.
We've only seen one game with Mostert available with Coleman and McKinnon week 1, and he got 19 to 31 backfield touches. He was clearly the bell cow in that backfield. So when Mostert is healthy, no one else matters. But when Mostert is out, it's Coleman and then McKinnon in that order. So that's how I treat it.
For fun, let's just call this like a showdown. If it's a showdown slate, San Fran versus the Rams, what's the exact box as far as the running backs to pick in this game?
I mean, Debo's the best running back you could play on the 49ers side. The last time these teams played, Debo had 96 yards after the catch and had 66 receiving yards.
I love it. A. like -3 yards, whatever it is. It's
I mean, it happened. What are you gonna do? Hey, listen, you can't shadow a guy in the backfield.
This is true. You'd be offsides. All right. We always finish strong here with tight ends. It's always a good time here on the Pick Six. Feel free to like and subscribe over there on the YouTube. Check out Manscaped. That was a fun read. So there's probably some good clips. Devin's got a soundboard now. He probably can get some good clips out of that. I have no idea, but he's been showing off on the weekends. Our shows that are going. He run throughout the week for showdowns as well too. You guys know us if you like and subscribe to the channel. Rich, tell the people where they can find you. I know they know where they can find you, but just in case there's like one person that randomly walked in there. Who's this Hribar guy? Tell them where they can find you and Twitter machine and the whole deal.
Sharpfootballanalysis.com at Lord Reeves. You can find me on those 2 spots. You can always find me Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, Pick Six show with John Daigle and Big Daddy Dean.
Same deal, Daigle?
Yeah, I drink so much champagne to match with Peter Overzet that I have to pee really bad now. So I'm gonna save my piece if I'm shaking and get literally run out of this show. At NowJDing on Twitter, Roto Football Podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe. We already have a Sunday preview out. And, of course, my friends, Reeves and Dean. And to promote another good show with my friends, I will be on the 4for4 show, Move the Line, immediately after this, talking betting for the Sunday slate. Love you all. I'm literally going to go pee right now.
I apologize to your bladder for running long. Thank you, chat, like, and subscribe. He was Rich Hribar. He was John Daigle, who's probably off screen now. I was Dean. This was football. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Enjoy week 12. We're out of here. Holler.